There we are. Mary just said I didn't unmute the sound. You can hear me now, right, Mary? I'll check comments. Oh, that's right. There's a lag. Anyway, as I was saying, as many times as I've been in front of a camera throughout my career in Hollywood and everything else, you're always a little nervous doing these shows. I suppose over time I'll get used to it. But I wanted to thank everybody for being here tonight for this show. I have two wonderful old friends here, both Raven Dana and Whitley Strieber, who I see just popped in. Thank you, Whitley. I just wanted to talk about a few things first. And of course, the first one I always address is the fact that there has been some confusion about the Breaking the Silence film series versus the live stream, which we're doing now. We are, in fact, doing a film series. The films run from 30 minutes to 40 minutes long. They will be done monthly. As we pick up steam, we might even be able to do them twice a month, but don't hold me to it just yet. And in these sort of documentary films, we are cinematically approaching the subject matter of this material cinematically, which is to mean that we're not doing it in the usual documentary style with the bright lighting and the dull guy sitting across from someone saying, "So what was it like to see aliens?" and that kind of stuff. We're letting people tell their stories directly to the camera without me sitting there asking questions. I do comment at the beginning and I comment a little bit about the end, but this show is really about the people having these experiences and being able to bring them forward. We recently did an episode, which will be our first with a Close Encounters witness named Daphne. It's been a little troubling doing it because she's being very careful about this show. She's a little bit nervous about coming forward. This is her first time. So she's coming back up from where she is down south in San Diego area this Sunday to work with me more closely to get the edit to where she likes it and where she feels comfortable with it. But this is how we work. This is how we work with people. We have Mary and myself in the room with a camera. We put a lavalier on the Close Encounters witness and we let them tell their story. Of course, I talk to them before, but not on camera, and I tell them to relax. It's easy for them because both Mary and I have had experiences with paranormal. They know that. They feel comfortable. They don't have a big crew standing there, and I probably should start using my P screen, but so they feel very comfortable and they're able to tell their story without feeling put on the spot. And it worked very well with Daphne, and I can't wait to release it. We're hoping to release it next week. I have a bunch of other people lined up who also want to tell their story, but I think when they see Daphne speak, it's moving. One of the people that I've showed it to already was literally moved to tears. They said they've never seen anything like it before, and that was quite a compliment. And my hope is that it will allow people to feel safe to come forward and talk. They'll see Daphne and say, "Wow, that was brave. I think I can do that." That's what we're hoping for, because there are millions of us out there, and we need to come forward and speak about this. We're really not being allowed to. And as Whitley himself says, we need a voice. We're not being given a voice. So let's give us a voice, thus breaking the silence. I am babbling on a bit. Of course, we're having not this Sunday, but the following Sunday, we're going to be meeting with Yvonne at our office with Robert Solis, who likes to be called Bob Solis. So many of you will be familiar with him. He is going to go under hypnosis, and we're going to film that again in the same way. And also, we're going to interview him at his house, but it's not really an interview. We're going to let him tell a story, as he did the other night on the show, except it'll all be very cinematic. I want to thank Yvonne and Bob so much for being our second guests on the show, on the film. I want to thank everybody who's watching who donated to our flood relief. I won't go into a lot of details, but many of you know our house was flooded. We lost just about everything, cars, all the equipment and stuff. And because of your help, I was able to get back up and running, get new computers, get new equipment to keep making these shows. Thank you so much from Mary and I both. can't thank you enough. You will from time to time see a Patreon banner pop up and a buy me a coffee, whatever one you like. If you want to help support what we're doing here, we're trying to build up some momentum so we can also have money to travel to different locations. A lot of people can't come here, or we can't get to them to interview them or have them tell their stories. So without further ado, I want to bring in both Raven and Whitley. Here we go. We'll see how I do at this. Add the stage, add the stage. And there we
Hey,
are. Didn't
hi.
mess it up. Hi, Raven. Hi, Whitley. And thank you
Hi. Good to
for
see
coming
you.
here. Yeah. I need to turn off my volume on this. There. Now we shouldn't be hearing an echo. I hope I can hear you in these headsets. Let's
Can you
see.
hear me?
No, I can't. That's something I have to work out. So anyway.
Okay. I am.
So,
Can
yeah.
I be heard?
Yes, I hear you quite clearly, and I hear Raven
Okay,
quite
good.
clearly.
Well, let's get going.
Okay. Of course, we're talking about that night in 1989 at your cabin.
Well,
So who
yeah.
wants to start first? Whitley, you probably should
Well, let me
talk
set
about.
the scene.
Sure.
The situation was this: Raven was there with Lori Barnes, another lady I'm afraid her name. I've forgotten her name. She was in the room with Lori Barnes, and they both saw the same thing. But I haven't talked to her in many years. We lost touch. Anne was there, of course. Andrew, was this the night, Raven, help me here, that Andrew and I were sleeping in the woods, or were we upstairs? Do you recall?
No, I think that you were in the woods and then you came in and went upstairs at some
That's
point.
right. Yeah, we were in the woods. Okay. So therefore, Drew Cummings, the filmmaker, and his wife were in the living room on the sofa bed. There was a camera in the hallway, a low light camera pointing down the hallway from the living room toward the two bedrooms. Raven was in the one closest to the living room, and Lori and the other lady, whose name may have been Elaine, I just can't remember.
It was Colleen.
Colleen, that's it. She was
Colleen
Colleen.
Langley.
Well, yeah, that was right. That's the name. And
Yeah.
she was there. And so Anne was upstairs. She must have been in bed upstairs alone. Andrew and I were out down in the woods, and I believe Dora Ruffner and Edward Conroy were in the woods as well. And I think that I don't think there was anyone in the basement that time. No, I think not. So that was the whole group. Therefore, I had no idea of anything happening during the night. But as Andrew and I came up to the house, we walked through the woods, and there was a little rise, and then you could see the swimming pool and the deck and the cabin beyond it. And we saw a translucent figure. Now, bearing in mind that he does not remember this, or so he says. At the time, though, he certainly did see it. It came down the front porch, turned, went rapidly across the deck, down the front yard, and went dashing off through the woods, moving in such a way that it went around the trees. In other words, it didn't move. It was solid in some way, even though it looked translucent. And solid, by solid, I mean it could not move through the tree trunks, pass through them. We went into the house immediately. Drew and his wife were on their feet. They had experienced a burst of heat so intense that they had thought the bed had burst into flames. And that, what had happened to them, we found out immediately, was that they had seen, Drew had seen this little man with a huge head peering at him from beside the bed. And he had thought, my God, Whitley's people are real. And he experienced a wave of fear, whereupon the face turned into the head of a hawk before his eyes and then disappeared. And I think it's time for Raven to take up the story now.
Okay, well, I actually went to bed that night not expecting much. Because I'd been at the cabin before, and while there had been some things that happened that particular night, there were a lot of people there, and I thought, I don't know, it'll probably be a quiet night. So I fell asleep easily. I woke up and I was hot. I was warm. I put the covers off. I turned over. I opened the window, and then something, and my very first thought was, oh no, it's a raccoon. I'm going to get bit. It's a skunk. I'm going to get skunked. I felt something come down onto the bed, and I very slowly and very carefully rolled over to see what it was. But it was not a forest animal. It was a visitor squatting in the window with 1 foot down and 1 foot up on the window. And I just stopped. I just froze. I can say that I was more at that point, I was startled rather than afraid. I was just like startled. And it raised a hand. I would call it a him just because, but it raised a hand. And my immediate instinct was, this might be my only chance to really touch this. And so I did. I reached forward and I touched the hand. And in that moment, there was this incredible sensation, not unlike, it wasn't unpleasant, but it was like a shock, like a very strong vibration that ran down my hand and down the side of my body and to my leg, where its foot was on the bed leaning up against my leg, which is what I had felt and thought it was, a raccoon or something. And I got this very strong impression, like, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to do? And in my mind, I thought I'd go down the hall because I knew the equipment was set up. So go down the hall was what I wanted. And it turned and disappeared out the window very quickly. And that's the point at which I got scared. I thought, holy crap. And I sat back against the wall and I immediately started to see the Eye of Horus. And I saw it behind closed eyes. If I closed my eyes, I saw it hovering in the room if my eyes were open. I didn't understand the connection between the visitors and the Eye of Horus or Egypt, but I had always had a love of that period of time. But it actually disturbed me more that I kept seeing this Eye of Horus than that I had seen a visitor. Like, that was concrete and real, and I touched it. And this image, this floating image, it was important that I remember it. And I didn't get up. I didn't get up until the sun came up because I did not want to go down the hall at this point. But finally, I had to go to the bathroom. So when the sun came up, I got up and I went, and everybody was up and milling around. And I went to the kitchen table, and that's when you came down the stairs, Whitley, and told everybody, don't speak, write down what happened. And we all wrote it down.
Yes, exactly. And, I asked you 3 years ago to write it down again so I could put it in the book, A New World, which I was working on at the time. And you wrote it just the story that you just told, just the price precisely, except there was one thing. You mentioned that you'd seen an Eye of Horus on the wall.
Yes,
You didn't just say that though, did you?
I did.
I didn't. Oh, okay.
After
I was
the fact.
so preoccupied with the cat, I must have missed it.
I
Anyway,
recall her saying that too
conversation.
before.
Anyway,
And also I'd had, by the time you came downstairs, I had had an awful allergic reaction. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't see. And I remember I had to take some of your allergy medication because I couldn't function.
there's an interesting story there. In 1986, note that this was before I published Communion. We found ourselves involved with an allergist who had been recommended by Dr. David C. Webb, who is mentioned in the frontispiece of Communion, acknowledged because of all of the support he gave us. I don't recall exactly where Dr. Webb came from into our lives, but he did appear in our lives, and he was extremely nice. He would come out to the cabin. He would meet with us and have dinner with us in Manhattan, and he was very supportive. He never for a moment voiced the slightest doubt. And if you look him up on Wikipedia, David C. Webb, you will find that he was an absolutely leading space scientist and was involved with every single alphabet agency in the country. In other words, he was a very high-level intelligence officer. And I certainly didn't know that and wasn't told that. He may have been introduced to us by Stanton Friedman. I just don't recall. In any case, he introduced me to an allergist who seemed to know exactly what we needed. And that's why we had those allergy pills and why we had the epinephrine injectors in every bedroom and had been taught to use them. And at the time, I was taking weekly allergy or daily allergy shots because of this.
I'm about to start taking allergy shots, just so you know.
Right. But in any case, so somebody on the inside knows about this.
Yes.
Oh, and by the way, a couple of years later, I stopped into the allergist's office to see him and thank him. And they'd never heard of him.
Wow.
Huh.
Well, that's
So-
not surprising the way these things go.
Yeah.
So you guys, so what you're saying is that the visitors tend to affect people and cause allergies within them, because I've been having terrible allergy problems.
Well, I didn't
and-
know anything about that at the time, until I came out and couldn't breathe and couldn't see, and Whitley filled me in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I had been warned already by Dr. Webb and by the allergist that if they come in when people are there, to be ready with the epinephrine injectors because there could be an allergic reaction. Interestingly enough, allergies have been a big part of my experience. And a few years ago, somewhat after, I think about 6 months after Annie passed away, a little round spot appeared on my right calf muscle on the inside of the calf. And every so often, there will be something happening in the house. The last time it happened was about a year and a half ago. I woke up and I was aware of the fact that there was something between my legs in the bed. Now, this was concerning because I live alone in this flat and I don't have any pets. So it had to be something else. And my reaction was I was just half asleep and there was something in the bed with me and I leaped up. I shouldn't have, but you can't help it. It left 2 claw marks, one on each calf muscle, and then also a little dot in the center of that circle. And I took pictures of all of this, and I wish I had them available, but I don't. And this is only because of Apple. They exist in my system, but they're
I can confirm it because you showed them to me.
Yeah,
yeah.
I remember you telling me and showing me. Yeah.
The Apple's cataloging system is so abysmal. I couldn't find them in time for the show. I know they're there though. In any case, for 6 months or so, the allergies were gone. Then it happened. They came up again very badly. And I was in England at the time. And the same thing happened, with the difference that I just lay there. I didn't move. I didn't open my eyes. I didn't move. I felt it, not even a prick. I just knew that something had happened. And the allergies were gone again for a few months. Then they came back so violently recently that I went to an allergist here because I thought, they're not showing up and I am going crazy. And I went through a thorough examination of where they did all those pinpricks on your back of all of the typical allergens for this area and came up 0. So I'm not allergic to things in this area, which leaves me again with them. And all I can say is they better, if they're going to start showing up in this house again, they better darn well do the darn thing with the pinprick, because now that I've injured one of my eyes, I can't take allergy medicine because it causes this a constriction in the area of the optic nerve around the eye, and
And that
so I can't
includes
take it.
Flonase.
What?
That probably includes Flonase, which
Yeah, it does.
Stop
And,
being-
indeed, I can't use Flonase.
Yeah. it stopped being effective for me. So you getting tired of sleeping with your mouth open? You don't mean to, but you wake up completely dry mouthed in the night.
Well, right now I'm in good shape, personally.
Good. I wish I could say the same.
Yeah, well, here we are, going down
Here we
this
are.
strange, wriggly kind of dark path.
So, Whitley, I remember something else from that night too that just occurred to me, that Drew said that when he woke up because he felt like the bed was being lifted. Do you remember that? That the visitor was actually lifting up the foot of the bed.
Oh, that's right. Drew Cummings said that.
Yes.
Yes, I remember. Goodness, yes, that's what woke them up.
That's what woke them up. Yep.
And, I spent a lot of time talking to a physicist about that event. A physicist who was willing to be a physicist instead of a a skeptic, I guess, and to refuse to think about it. And he did think about it very carefully. And what had happened was, after the being turned into the head of a hawk, it disappeared. But it apparently didn't disappear. It did something to make light go around it, so that it looked to Drew Cummings and his wife like it had disappeared.
But it cloaked itself.
It cloaked itself. But when Andrew and I came up to the house, it realized that its only way out was the front door, because otherwise you'd have to go down through the basement and out the garage, and that was not so easy. And we were walking toward that front door. It then left the house immediately, but in order to move, it released some of the whatever it was that was doing the cloaking, and they figured that was a tremendously powerful, something that was powerfully able to bend light, therefore had its own gravity. And that would have, whatever was doing that was creating heat. And that was the heat that Drew Cummings and his wife felt. As the thing left the house, it released heat so that it could, presumably, so that it could move. And and when we saw it, it wasn't completely visible. It was translucent because it hadn't released all of the invisibility just as much as it had to in order to guide itself around. So what you're seeing there is technology, and I see that people are experiencing static, and that is something that
Storm
happens
bug?
to me from time to time, and it has. There's no way to fix it. Let me put it that way.
Well, Whitley, there was another weekend at the cabin talking about heat, and I believe Dora was also there, and everyone, I was sleeping in the living room that night, and everyone felt this intense, incredible heat. And we heard rain, and we heard chat, we heard talking, and we got up. And after we talked to each other a bit, we went outside. There had been no rain. It had not been raining.
Right. Well,
Right?
was that also the night that they jumped around in the living room?
Yes.
And you
Yes.
couldn't, when they were jumping around, you could talk to each other, but nobody could move.
But nobody could move. That's right.
There were cots. They were on cots in the living room. You and Dora and oh my, time passes, doesn't it?
Ed?
Oh,
Ed?
yes.
I think it was
Oh,
Ed.
yes.
Ed was there, and what was his name? He was at the time.
Mark.
Mark, yeah, Mark Barash.
Mark Barash.
Yeah. All of you were there, and what was interesting about that was that Mark Barash and you ended up telling very different stories about the same thing.
Yeah, I remember that.
But not immediately. Afterwards, their stories changed, but yours didn't.
Mm-hmm.
I remember everyone told me their story verbally. And then a little while later, Mark's stories and I believe Dora's story changed. And so it's always very strange. This is I wrote about this a lot in Them, and the memory, the brain does really strange things when it is confronted with experiences that it can't catalog.
Absolutely.
Yes,
Yep.
the night that I saw the thing in the kitchen, I know I've talked to both of you about that. It was fully awake, walking in there to get some water at 3 a.m. What other time would it be? And my late wife Jilly had left a butcher block, a big wooden one that was sort of tan and wood, sitting in front of the refrigerator door, which I thought was just, why did she do that? And as I'm looking at it, it started to move its legs. And then I realized it was just 2 legs. And then I saw it was an entire being that looked at me like, ah ha ha. And it moved so fast, it was a blur. It went right through the wall. And I ran around the other side into the living room to see if I could catch it. But then I started laughing. It was ridiculous. They move that fast. But I thought my mind thought, well, it couldn't be what it was seeing. So it must have been something else.
And that's what the mind does, right? It picks a pattern that's close to whatever you're seeing and turns it into that. That's what the mind's designed to do. But yeah, and that's why memories change over time. You know, not just in this situation, but in any situation. And I think that, I think it's just because for what I do, have spent a lot of time noticing and recording. Since I've been a kid, if I have any kind of experience or a dream, I write it down. So every time something happens, I write it down. Then I can go back and look at it again. So I don't have quite the same. My brain is pretty accustomed to weird stuff and always has been since I've been little. So even if I don't understand it, I'm likely to remember it.
Which is why your story was stable, I think, and has remained stable all these years.
Well, and I think I'm just lucky because I came from a household where the unusual was normal. It wasn't, none of that stuff was a big deal. It was just, my grandmother saw her brother who is dead. My grandmother had dreams that came true. When I mentioned to them about something standing at the foot of my bed, my grandfather said, it could be a fairy, good for you. No, I don't know. Are you afraid of it? And I said, no. He said, then don't worry about it. So it was just, and of course my dad was an undertaker. So there's a little bit of Addams Family factor in the household,
I love the Addams Family.
Yep.
But Raven, you were talking about, you said, because of what I do. Would you share with us what it is you exactly do? Because not everybody knows.
Oh, well, what I do now is I work with people to help them overcome obstacles, their own mental obstacles, fear and anxiety, and how we stop ourselves. So I'm trained in a lot of different ways to be a really good noticer. Noticing is what I do. I pick up very subtle clues. And of course, this came from my childhood too. Basically, I grew up in your typical dysfunctional family and got really good at picking up subtle clues. But that's what I do. I talk to people and I help them move through their fear, whatever it may be in life, not specifically about the visitors. But I help people to get better at having happy lives by moving away from fear and towards consciously creating what they want.
And there's a link to your YouTube channel where you're going to be giving a class, you said.
Yes, I do. I do classes pretty regularly on my YouTube channel, which is called Walking Between the Worlds. I do meditations and journeys and little classes. The classes that are coming up will basically be called Practical Magic, like how to be in the flow and how to go with the flow, right? How to do that. Practical Magic. So that's what I'll be doing towards the end of the month.
Very nice. And I'm putting up a link there to, many of you may not be aware of Whitley's site. It's one of my favorite places to go on the internet for really good information. His live stream, or not live streams, his recorded streams and his podcast, which are just excellent. And they hold me every night practically watching them. And there's a link down there to that. So now, Whitley, this was all written about in Breakthrough, correct?
Yes, the whole thing. And I returned to it in a new world because I've learned a lot more about the communication that took place, which was very, very complex. On the night of the Horus, I have Horus, and it related to another experience that had happened to someone else up the road who also saw a little man who turned into a hawk-faced when he was there. He's decided he was finishing out a house, and they had just about finished the house, but it was not completely closed in, and all of his tools were there. So he decided to spend the night in the house, and he woke up because there was movement on the porch, and this little man with a huge head was standing there, and it scared the dickens out of him. And as soon as he was scared, it turned into it didn't turn into the head of a hawk. It turned into a bird of paradise and disappeared. And, it was the middle of the night, but he still packed his tools up anyway and got the hell out of there. And I never told this story to the people who bought that house. I didn't have the heart. But the house was obviously haunted by something, because they called me one morning and said, Whitley, there's this funny buzzing in our fireplace. They had a glass enclosed fireplace. And I said, well, what do you mean? It was the summer. And he says, well, you can't see it. It's very dark, and there's this buzzing in there. I said, well, okay, I'll come up and see. I thought, what the heck could it be? And so I went up there and I walked into their house, and they're all concerned. The buzzing is going on. You can hear it. The whole house is full of it. So and I realized their fireplace was packed with tens of thousands of flies.
Oh,
Wow.
I said, Steve, don't open that. Don't open it. Don't open it. Because he was about to open it. He was
no.
wanted to figure out what it was. I said, stay away. And overnight they went away. We don't ever know. We don't know for sure what happened.
Is this the guy that owns the house now?
I don't know. No, he doesn't own it anymore.
Okay, you know, the guy that owns the house now actually contacted us and wanted one of these
Oh no, that's
for
not
the
the
house.
same house. That's the
Yeah.
new cabin. That
Oh,
he's a
okay.
wonderful man, and
Yes.
he and his wife have got a Whitley Strieber room in the basement with all kinds of memorabilia and stuff. No, and he's
Yeah, and they
got
have
one of
one of
those.
my
It's in the
heads.
basement. I've been there.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. And so what about the other people that were there that night? Have you stayed in touch with them over the years? Either one of you? Have you heard
No,
anything more from them?
some of them have passed away. Quite a few, in fact. Dora's gone,
Yeah,
and
there's been a lot of that.
yeah, well, that does happen to people. My doctor says you got to watch out for me. I've got 100% death rate in my practice. And that's what we're here
You
for.
need to
So
change doctors.
what?
Wow. I said you need to change doctors.
No, he's just a very sardonic sense of humor, but only with
Oh, well,
me.
that's
Not
good.
like that with the
That's
other
good.
patients.
No, sure. Absolutely.
He's heard
So,
some of the stories of the pranks I used to play when I was a little boy, so he's willing to. He's more than willing to have fun when we're together. So,
it's good. Somebody just said about the flies, the Amityville horror, because they
is that
had that
connected?
scene.
Is there something like that in the Amityville horror?
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
there is. There
On
is.
every
There's always flies. It seems connected
Because
to.
that's interesting. Because I wonder if there's something in demonology about masses of flies. I know Lord of the Flies was supposedly one of Satan's more enjoyable titles.
Yeah,
Um,
amazing movie.
uh, yeah,
I don't know. Yeah, flies are a thing, though.
yeah. Well, anyway, the flies eventually left, and but the house was. Other things happened in the house. It wasn't. It's a nice little house. I saw it about a year ago, and it was very nice. The documentary on Travel Channel about me um, is filmed. A lot of it was filmed at the new cabin, and what we're talking about tonight happened at the old cabin. Things happened at the new cabin too, and in fact, I stayed there alone about 6 months ago, and it started up right on schedule that night. I was sitting in the living room, and all of a sudden the roof just went wild. It's a big cathedral ceiling, and you could hear all kinds of sounded like a convention up there, people walking around and stuff. And I thought, feels just like home. But
Yeah.
then I was in the meditation room where I used to have such extraordinary experiences in that cabin, and all of a sudden I heard from downstairs out in the dark of the house this very scary sounding kind of cough. And I thought to myself, it's a joke. I know it's a joke. But I still found myself getting up and going through the whole house to be sure all the windows and doors were locked. And I knew it was my leg was being pulled.
Yeah, you got pranked.
Yeah. Well, locking
Exactly.
all
Well,
the windows and doors won't help. Won't help.
I was a big prankster when I was a kid, and uh, I come from a family of pranksters. My father was a prankster before me, so it wasn't original.
Right.
He encouraged his boys by telling us funny stories about his pranks. And then when we played pranks on him, he couldn't get as furious as he wanted to, because after all, I mean, mother would say, Carl, you shouldn't have told him those stories.
Of course, you and Richard used to play pranks on each other.
My brother. Well, yeah. Well, yeah.
Yes, of
Well, let's not
course.
go there
Oh,
because
we
he's
love your
still,
brother.
he's
He's
much too
wonderful.
dangerous.
Well,
Um,
that picture of him on Facebook certainly is.
yeah, he looks. He thinks that's a good picture. He's a very scary guy. um, but yeah, but so I guess I get you get what you get what you deserve in life. But I've had a great life with the visitors. It's been real hard and really scary a lot of times, but basically, I wouldn't trade it for anything. It's been remarkable. What an adventure my life has been.
Well,
And used to
also, I
say,
mean,
I signed on for an interesting life, but I had no idea what would happen when I met you.
well, you certainly live in a much larger reality than most human beings will ever dream of being part of. I mean, just
Although I think we're heading
the
that way.
level of awareness.
You
I'm
know, I
sorry,
think,
Raven.
oh no, I think we're all heading there. I think things are beginning to open up, and people who haven't had experiences are even starting to loosen up and having things happen. And I think it's just where we need to go. We have to evolve. I mean, we have to evolve. I'm finding myself pleased to hear physicists talking about and shows talking about alternate dimensions and beings living in other dimensions, and then it's not just about aliens coming down from some planet somewhere, that there's something wholly other going on. And I think that's a big change. That's a big difference than what people were saying even 10 years ago, at least out loud. To actually acknowledge that, like living with the dead that are here, but we don't necessarily see them all the time, or some of us can't see them at all, and others of us can. The visitors, I think, is the same conversation, because there's that connection that the visitors live in the dimension, frequency, zone, liminal space where the dead live. And so I think we're becoming more acclimated to jumping the liminal gap, right? To being more conscious and aware of our larger, the larger part of us.
I think that's the basic theme of everything that all of us are doing right now. Basically,
Yes.
I think you've hit the nail on the head. Well, listen, George George, uh, this material about Beelzebub is fascinating. He's put, and if you're not in the chat, folks, you should go in the chat, and I'm going to read some of it because I know not everyone is in the chat.
George is an old friend of ours, very dear friend.
Well, good. Well, it's a wonderful comment, and I'm going to read it. Beelzebub, also known as Baalzebub, is a demon in demonology who is associated with the Philistine god Baal and is one of the 7 deadly demons, or 7 princes of hell. He is often depicted as being capable of flying and is known as the Lord of the Flyers, or the Lord of the Flies. In many ancient cultures, flies were considered imperfect creatures, spawned from decay and associated with disease and food contamination. Beelzebub's association with flies could be due to that fact. Now I'm going to do something else, because there's another way of looking at flies, and I'm going to read you all a poem about a fly, okay? On my slice of pie, a pregnant fly. She is busy with the sugar glaze and a bit of cherry. Always hungry, I'm sure, carrying all those babies. If I swat her, then they also must die. How her many-lensed eyes reflect me, watching carefully. Her wings flutter, busy, nervous. She knows she's despised, but not by me. I have fallen in love with her, and her pulsing belly, and the little bit of hope that somehow, in all the great vault of the world, the clouds, the speeding days, the stars, that little bit of hope, that is what she carries of the vast of life.
Hmm. Yes.
So there's other ways of looking at flies.
Yes, there are. And I remember that day you came up and had lunch with Mary and I, reading that to us. It was wonderful.
Did I read it to you?
Yeah, you did, but I
Oh,
don't mind hearing it again.
Oh, well, yeah, it's a good poem, I think. I
It
think it
is.
tells a story about a part of the
Yes.
world that we hardly even notice, except to swat it. Of course, after I wrote the poem, I noticed that flies seemed to become almost tame around me, and I thought, what have I done? Now,
What have I done
now
this?
I've got to put I gotta put I've gotta put up or shut up. And I can't get out the fly swatter now, can I?
Nope.
No, you can't.
Well,
Do you find, as I have found, as I get older, I have a difficult time killing anything, except maybe a black widow about to jump on me, but I will go out of my way to save small insects and all forms of life because the older I get, and maybe it's because, I have less time on the planet. I don't know, but I don't think it is. I just have this deep connection with everything that lives and how important each one of those lives is that I can't stand the thought of killing anything.
Something Anne said really did the same thing for me. I asked her once about compassion, and her answer was indirect but very powerful. She said, each of us is all we have. And when you think about that, and you're out here in LA where we live, and you've realized that, as always is true, uh, everybody else in on the road has left their IQs at home, and you're ready to just you're ready to just you're so furious. You think they're just like me, and each of them is all they have, and they probably find me as annoying a driver as I find them. And I look at you guys, and I look at the chat, and I think we're all in here, and each of us is absolutely unique and absolutely alone, and we can never really find anyone except ourselves. There's a wonderful book, or series of books, I should say, by a philosopher and physicist named Bernardo Kastrup, who writes about the idea that the world is not a physical place, that it is a construct of mind.
yes.
And
Agreed.
his reasoning is this: we never address or contact the outside world. All we contact are the electrical impressions coming into us from uh, our sight, our taste, our smell, the touch on our skin. That's all we have. That's what we have. We don't have direct connection to reality. Therefore, even if it is in some way physical, for us, that can never be true.
Hmm.
And that makes all the difference in the world.
And even that little bit that we are able to, those few frequencies that we have the equipment to tap into, we know are less than 1% of all known frequencies. Now, we're not even talking about unknown frequencies. So, how much of reality is it impossible for us to experience directly? Well, 99 point some odd percent of it, obviously.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
but that's one of the reasons why I love to look at other creatures and study uh, their consciousness and their capacities. I just spent months looking into the bees and how bees operate, and that they can see polarized light, and that they, how they communicate with each other and with humans. That we're not the only critters on the planet, and there are so many other creatures that have a deeper, broader experience of realities that we don't even know exist. That there's so much for us to learn from really being part of acknowledging that we are inside of nature. We're not separate from nature, that there's so much for us to learn by being the animals that we are.
It's very true, I think. Very true.
But the double slit experiment fascinated me, and that's why I wrote that story I shared with you guys. because consciousness alters reality, quite literally, form, substance, by observing it, and then it acts differently when we're not observing it. Said to me that each one of us, to a degree, creates our own reality and doesn't have exactly the same reality, and that also, I think, teaches us to take pause and consider that when we're dealing with other conscious entities, other human beings, and visitors for that matter.
Well, that's something that I've gone back and I've thought about a lot, about that moment of touching the visitor's hand, and crossing the barrier, crossing the line of reality. What did it take for that being to cross into a realm in which my senses could actually physically pick up that experience? And I do feel that since that time, I have physically been different, that I have become more and more and more sensitive as the years have gone by. And I believe it's a direct result of that contact, having stepped into that liminal space with that being at that moment.
That's very interesting, because I think we have a much more capacity than we think. I've been reading this wonderful book that just came out. It was recommended to me by my dear friend and co-author Jeffrey Kripal, called simply They Flew.
Mm.
And what it is a deep dive into all of these people who supposedly levitated in the Middle Ages. And it's brain bending, because they did. They had to have. And we can't do that now. And I was reading another book by a African shaman called Malidoma Patrice Sommet, and he describes in his book his grandfather's funeral. His grandfather was also a shaman, and a very powerful one. And when he died, he still, after death, could animate his body. He could still move his body. And when his funeral rites occurred, there were numerous events involving gravity being altered. And when you put these things together, it's no wonder the government can't figure out the propulsion system of the UFO.
Absolutely.
Because the propulsion system of the UFOs is very much, and I think correctly, described in that book, UFO Sky Pilots, which tells about numerous different witnesses. And I bet you one or the other of you have had this experience. I know I had it only very briefly, where you put your hands on something in one of these things, and whoosh, your whole consciousness goes out into the machine itself, and you become it.
Yes.
You described it as a ball, as I recall.
Yeah, probably.
Because you were sitting in the back or something, and I had a very similar experience. The same.
I didn't hear you.
I'm sorry. Am I muted? You can hear me okay?
No, you're muted. You're not muted, but your audio fell off.
Well, yeah. I had a similar experience to that, and I was in a craft where there was a ball, like in the middle of the console.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I didn't touch that. When I was in that, this is a different experience for me. I did not touch that. I just thought about stealing the thing, and I had that laughter from behind me, and it was too scary, and I didn't move a muscle after that. UFO Sky Pilots, by the way, is by Grant Cameron. And it's an excellent, fascinating book, if anyone. And also there's a Dreamland interview with Grant about the book on unknowncountry.com. So, but we, no, the experience I was talking about was something that I've kind of always remembered. It's not something that, it was something that was with me from childhood. And it just, in it, I put my hands on something and whoosh, I become this machine and I'm flying like crazy. And it ends. I'd say the memory is a second and a half long at most. And it's completely unconnected. That's why I've never written about it. I have loads of these just unconnected memories, and I just never know. Unconnected memory, or is it a memory? Is it something I dreamed up, or is it a memory? I'm not
Probably
sure.
it's a memory, but again, dancing in that liminal space, it's hard to tell how the brain brings it back. I
bottom
think
line
that
is
we spend a lot of time there.
You might have some ideas about how to bring that into focus, Raven.
Well, I do, I play with that. When you said that, my thought is I've had the experience, I can't do it intentionally. And I have had the experience of touching something in my ordinary life and becoming completely aware of it as if it is me and I am it. I've had that happen with my car, weird as that seems, and have figured out things that were going on with it that I am entirely clueless. I mean, you can ask me anything about a car and I can't tell you what it is, but I've had it happen with my car. I've had it happen with plants. I've had it happen with equipment. And it's just, sometimes I don't know, merge. It's a thing. So I know what you're talking about. I can't remember something specific about in the visitor zone, but for sure in my ordinary life, I've had that happen. And I just describe it to my sensitivity. Whitley, you said something earlier about people levitating and that we can't do that anymore. And I don't think that's true. I think we've forgotten we've forgotten how to fly, right? We've forgotten how to let ourselves do what we know how to do. I don't think that
we
we
sure
can't
have.
do it. I think we don't allow ourselves to do it in the same way that kids can talk to things that adults can't see. And then by the reactions of the adults, it trains the kid to ignore it until they can no longer see it. It doesn't mean the capacity isn't there. I mean, when you said that, it also made me think of Michael Talbot's book, right? Because he talks about all of those strange experiences that human beings have all around the world. The book I mean, it's just jettisoned. The name's gone right out of my brain.
Well, yeah, that's right. If the name doesn't go out of your brain, the name of the book doesn't go out of your brain, the name of the author will. You
Right.
can't have both. I know this from long
Well, that's
experience.
right. It's Michael Talbot. Now, do you have the name of the book? 'Cause I got the name of the author.
Holographic Universe.
That's it. Holographic Universe.
I'm cured. I have suddenly remembered something.
Yay.
Yeah, Michael was a good friend, and he had an experience at the cabin, actually, at the new cabin, and which was that he got up early one morning and was down in the family room where there was a big French door leading out onto and there was this woman standing looking at him through the French door, and he realized it's not a human woman. As soon as that thought occurred to him, she turned around and walked off down the driveway, and he was just stupefied.
Mm-hmm.
He died so young, poor guy. I mean, gosh, when he was passing away, he called the day before he passed away. He called me and he said, "Whitley, I'm going," and I hated that to see him go. He wrote a wonderful vampire novel called A Delicate Dependency, one of the best vampire novels ever written, and it's hardly known.
Mm-hmm.
It got published out in paperback as a paperback original. It's just exquisite. Well, listen, the host is gone. He's apparently
He's abandoned
going
ship.
to tears. So, um, uh, I don't know what we should do. Um,
Well, we keep talking till he comes back. I mean,
can you sing? I mean, maybe.
I can. What would you like to hear?
No, I don't think we should sing. Because I can't sing. In fact, uh, when my son was 7 years old, I used to sing a lullaby to him every evening. And one evening he said, "Daddy, I'll sing."
Oh, that's funny.
And I said, "Why? Why don't I like to sing? It's my time to sing." He said, "Dad, you can't sing." It's true.
Oh, the honesty of children.
Yeah. When I was in school, in grade school, the nun who ran the choir was very strict. Everybody had to sing. But when she heard me sing, she said, "You just move your mouth."
Yeah, there's a hint.
Yeah. I can go right up and down the scale and never hit a note. Where is this going, Raven? Here we are sitting here.
I know, right? I think there's a door that's going to kick open, Whitley. I think that
There
everything
has to be.
we've done for our whole lives and all of our experiences are drops of water in a bucket that's going to overflow. And I can feel it. It's like I can feel the surface like this, right? Just a few more drops. I mean, which may be, a couple million more drops, but I don't know. But I can feel the surface is convex and it's gonna go. And
The
I
thing
think
is, there's always a last
in
drop.
our lifetime. Yeah.
And it's so ironic that we're talking about drops of water with a host was flooded out a couple of weeks ago in an unbelievably unlikely flood in a place that doesn't even require flood insurance because there's no flood possibility. They wake up in the middle of the night and the house is filled with water.
Yeah.
It was, I don't know if I ever shared this with either one of you, but years ago when I was in high school, I woke up one morning. I was in my waterbed and in my room, and I got out of it and I stepped into water just like that, and it was slapping up against the walls and stuff. And I made my way down a hallway out to our living room. Now our living room overlooked the ocean. We were up on a hill. There was another hill opposite to us with houses on it too, and a big valley between us. And down below was the Pacific Ocean, and you could see the curvature of the earth from our window. It was a lovely place, except on this occasion, it was flooded all through the house, and the deck was flooded. And when I looked across, you couldn't see the valley. You could just see some of the houses on the other hills sticking up. The water level had risen that high, and it terrified me. And I woke up just absolutely freaked out.
Wow.
And I never forgot that. So you might imagine that having that water in the house and seeing it raising up against the sliding glass door, going higher and higher, was well, it wasn't deja vu. It just I remembered that dream, and I wondered, what the source of that dream actually was. And of course, we've all had warnings and dreams and experiences with the visitors where they have warned us of such things, and to actually have it happen was amazing.
Yeah, I know it. I've been living with that for a long time, and mostly when I've written about it, I've been ignored.
Yeah,
But
like my movie. That
yeah, uh,
you warned, but you didn't listen.
Superstorm. If you pick Superstorm up and read it, it's very accurate.
Yes.
And the
Yeah.
one before, Nature's End, written long, long ago, if you read that, you see the fires that we have all the time now are all laid out in that book.
And there's lots of flooding going on in the New York area again right
Yeah,
now.
that's right.
Terrible flooding. And so And it's going to happen again, and I would talk to the residents around us, and they were so confused as to why that happened. The few that I mentioned that this was a result of climate change, they just kind of looked at me funny. Like I said, I saw a UFO or something. They just gave me that look and, oh, kind of thing. And I warned them. I said, this is going to happen again. So we need to be prepared for it, you know? So,
Well, yeah. I mean, it's always going to be like this now, and we got all kinds of complex problems. But
yes, we do.
we also have each other, as you found
Yes,
out when you got
Mhm.
flooded out and put up that GoFundMe, um, and
it was
so
amazing.
you're there. We're there for each other, and that's going to become more and more important over time.
Mhm.
But we need to listen to the warnings.
We
If you
do.
have if you have a dream, even if you think that's all it was, and there's a very linear dream where it makes complete sense, and there's a very strong warning in it, we need to take heed to it, not just say, "Oh, that was just a dream. That'll never happen." So
Well, dreams are never just dreams. Dreams
no,
have layers and layers of information like lasagna. They're multi-dimensional ways that we communicate with deeper levels of reality, ourselves, each other. I think the dreams are critically important. We have forgotten how to dream. We've forgotten that sharing dreams is a critical skill because there's so much information there.
and so the indigenous people, like these guys, the
Yep.
Aborigines. I mean, this is a 2,500-year-old painting of the Wangina, the
Hmm.
people who created the universe and came into their dreams, and they believe very much that the dream time was a very real place, and I think it is.
It is a real place.
Yeah.
I think that, we are in the dream time, that what we're experiencing here now with each other is one little slice of the pie, one little aspect of the dreaming. And unfortunately, we've also been taught, for the most part, to limit ourselves to this slice, and it's not necessary. And I think that we are learning how to break free, and it's a good thing. I think the
I
change.
see. Go ahead.
I just think that the change that needs to occur with us will change. It has to be at the level of consciousness before anything else can happen. Our awareness has to open.
Well, many of us are working very hard at that. It's extremely important. I see that we've gone over an hour. That's wonderful. We had a lot to talk about. We could probably do this all night. Um, someone is asking, will you take questions about the earliest visitor experiences? Were the rest of your families being visited too? Did you speak of it to each other? Well, I'll start off first. Yes, and no, we didn't uh, speak about it to each other, with the exception of my grandfather. Um, one of my grandfathers did talk to me about it, and of course, he was shunned by my grandmother and much of the people. For those of you who've seen my movie, but something is there, you can see what happened with that. My mother did not level with me until she was almost past. She almost passed away, and then she did level with me that she had seen plenty. And when she saw me on television with Whitley and Yvonne and other people speaking about my experiences, I thought, oh boy, here we go. And she says, no, you don't understand. I know you're telling the truth, because it was, it really got me. So, yes, it has been happening to my family on both sides. Who's next?
Well, I don't want to talk about it because it's a very fraught deal with my family. Suffice to say, it happened to me. It happened a little bit to Anne.
Yeah. And Raven?
Well, my experiences started very early on. I can remember being, I don't know, 4 or 5, and seeing what I would now label as a visitor standing at the foot of the bed. I was sleeping in my grandmother's room, my grandmother's bed, and just being able to see, the top 2/3 of the head, the big eyes, the nose, and getting pictures and images, and these experiences of like flying out the window and down towards the river, which you know, again, eventually, like I said, I mentioned some of those things to my grandfather, and he was like, "Yeah, don't worry about it. If it doesn't frighten you, then you know, just go with it. It's an adventure." That he's, you know, there are lots of things in experience that we can't explain, and so yeah, but boy, I tell you, as I got older, the synchronicities that occurred around the visitor experiences when I started thinking, I was just a kid. Those must have been dreams. I got proven wrong over and over and over again by other people coming to me out of the blue and telling me their experiences. I remember when I first came to Ohio and when I first came to Ohio, I was talking to somebody. I was testing a well for them. And this person was, oh, I came from New York. Or where did you come? Oh, Yonkers. No kidding. I was in Yonkers. So he tells me this story. He said, you know, I've never told anybody this, but I feel like I got to I'm going to tell you because you're a Yonkers girl. So he says, do you know Mount St. Vincent? Yeah, I used to go there all the time. Well, did you know that there were, you know, underneath Mount St. Vincent, there are like catacombs, there are tunnels that go right all the way to St. Mary's Church? Yeah, I know. I lived on the block, St. Mary's Street. Well, he said, I got to tell you, there was things living under the ground there. I kept having my crewmates quit on me because they kept seeing these little guys with big heads under the ground. This is way before anybody talked about the visitors. You know, this was like, and I was like, okay, then, like, yes, that was on the street that I lived. These catacombs ran from one church to the other. And this guy is telling me in Ohio all these years later, because in those catacombs, you know, we used to go below ground between the church and the school when the weather was bad. And one of the things that happened to me as a kid that, of course, I sent off into La La Land in my mind is that I saw a visitor under there. And I said it to, I was the last one. I was straggler behind. I saw the big eyes and I said it to a nun. There's something there with big eyes. And she said, it's just a rat. Keep moving. And I'm thinking, Jesus, if that's a rat, I really got to keep moving because it was as big as me, right? So that's the connection between those tunnels and where this guy told me they were laying in the new sewage lines underneath the ground in Mount St. Vincent. I went, okay, got it. Yeah, that was no dream or hallucination or rat, you know. So things like that kept showing up from my history in the form of other people coming to me and telling me things that, again, validated again and again and again and again until, you know, eventually I gave up. Okay, it was totally all my experience. It was real. So, you know,
Catherine,
right down to where I started having dreams about the visitors. And then I picked up Whitley's book. I had just said to my girls who were young, very young at the time, I had drawn the face and the eyes. And I had said to the girls, have you ever seen anything like this? And they said, no. Well, with that little drawing still on my table, 2 days later, I went to the bookstore and there was Whitley's book. I'm telling you, I mean, I had to sit down. I sat down on the stairs in the bookstore and just said, need this, need this book, because there it was.
Many, 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 many of us did that. And I do remember my late wife, Jilly, bringing home the book to me. And that was it. My life was turned upside down. Thanks a lot, Whitley. And, you know, it just went from there. Catherine McLeod, who I know, she asked, you told me about being up in Bernie, California is somewhat close to the border of Oregon, a little mining logging town up in the middle of nowhere, and a little tiny place. And I used to spend some summers there with my grandmother. And to make a long story real short, because we are running out of time, I was with her and my step grandfather, and it was at night, and they wanted to go to the liquor store, and it was closed. So they were going to drive to the next little town, which was, you know, a distance away, through this winding road in the forest. I mean, there was nobody else on the road. And then all of a sudden, they slowed down because there were people on the road with hard hats on, and they're making a stop. And I looked off to the left, and in the woods was this structure that was brightly lit, and in my mind it was some kind of construction they were doing or something. But these men somehow subdued my grandmother and grandfather. They both slumped over, and then they very easily lifted them out of the car. And then they took me and they took us into this structure. And I remember coming towards it, and there was a door, and it was brightly lit, and those lights were almost hurting my eyes. And that was the last thing I remembered. The next thing I did remember was being in the car with them and getting to the other store, and it was quite late and everything was closed. So I think that's what Catherine was asking about, because I had talked about that more than once, maybe even back as far as when we were in high school. I don't remember, Catherine, but that is one that I never went to Yvonne for and had a regression on. I'm thinking now, all these years later, I bet what's been suppressed is still there. It'd be really interesting to look at what happened. Well, you guys, thank you so much for being on the show. You were absolutely fantastic. You're always great to be around. I love you both very, very, very much.
Oh, I love you too, Steve. Thanks for having me. Good
Yeah,
to see
Thanks
you.
for having me too.
Well, thanks for coming up.
Had a long day. And folks, thank you for being here. I am so appreciative of your interest.
Me too. So we will see you again next Friday, and we will have James Loff, who's going to come and speak with us about his new book. And we're going to talk about experiences that he has had himself. Again, thank you so much for attending tonight, and we love you all a whole bunch. See you next time.